Are you an oversharer? A data dumper? Perhaps you're a rambler with a side of rabbit holes. Well, if that's the case, I'd love to invite you to my upcoming online workshop, The Goldilocks Effect. Yep, how to say not too little, not too much, but just the right amount to land your message with impact every single time. This is an online interactive, as in you will get to ask me questions and I will answer them. This is an online and interactive workshop that's taking place in just a couple of weeks. Thursday, the 30th of October, 12:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. It's a 75-minute workshop, so you can take your lunch break, you can block out a little bit of time, and if something pops up and you can't make it live, there will, of course, be a recording, and you can always send me a note and ask me the questions that you want to ask. So, Thursday, the 30th of October, The Goldilocks Effect. Come and join me. It's only $67, and the link is in the show notes. Now, let's get on with today's episode. Welcome to another episode of Speaking with Confidence with Kat Matson, the show where I coach you, humble leaders, public servants, business owners, and other corporate hippies, how to show up and speak up with confidence so you can contribute to the conversations that matter to you and make your dent in the universe. Thank you for joining me for another episode. It's awesome to have you here. Episode 169. I mean, goodness gracious me, I'm getting closer to the 200 mark. Anyway, we'll think about that another time. Today, I'm responding to a listener question, and this is a doozy. It's a doozy. What happens? What do you do when you realize that you're in the midst of an absolute pear-shape of a presentation? That is, you're standing on stage, you're delivering, and you feel like you're bombing. So Lauren sent me in this little note, and I'm going to paraphrase. Basically, she said, I'm wondering whether you can help me, Kat, with a recent presentation. To be honest, she said, it was a disaster. I've been wondering what I did wrong, and to be honest, it's quite embarrassing. She says that a few things probably went wrong. One was she'd been sick in the lead up to this particular presentation, and so she'd lost her voice and she hadn't really felt prepared. She hadn't had the time to prepare in the way that she was planning. Also, when she actually then got on stage, some of her slides weren't working properly. They were, the images were garbled and all this weird stuff was going on, and she didn't realize until she was actually on stage. The other thing, she was presenting right after lunch at a conference, and she noticed that there were people in the audience who were asleep. Oh, that is awful. So she said, maybe my topic wasn't of interest, but gosh, watching people sleep, it really threw me. So she says that she tried to focus on the supporters in the room, like the people who were nodding and smiling at her, but she really felt like it was a bit of a flop. So I want to address all of that because this stuff happens. And in fact, it happened to me just recently. I was booked in to deliver a massive national tour with a corporate client. I was the keynote speaker for their professional development days. And as I tend to do, I'd left the preparation to last minute, and I was sicker than I have been in a really, really, really long time, like flattened sick. And so my preparation was not ideal, and it was interstate. In fact, the first gig was in Adelaide, and I really wasn't feeling up to it. Like, I was feeling so bad that I was thinking I was going to have to cancel. So the first day that I'm delivering, I felt underprepared. I was feeling unwell. My voice wasn't really up to it, and I was feeling pretty blur. And of course, every neutral expression, let alone disinterested expression in the audience, I was just telling myself that I was completely bombing. Of course I wasn't, but that's what I felt. So I first of all want to acknowledge Lauren's issue. It sucks. Like, it sucks when this happens. So how can you prevent it happening, and what can you do when you're in that moment? What can you do when you're standing on stage and things are bombing? So first of all, let's deal with these in order. First of all, preparation is key. There is no doubt about it. And so when you're sick, or when you have not had the ideal preparation that you wanted, how can you revert to standard messaging so you don't have to work too hard? For example, with that gig in Adelaide, I had done enough client prep, like I'd had enough conversations with the client, that rather than spending all of the time that I was intending to spend on creating a spectacular slide deck and coming up with all of these new models and getting really clever, I actually just reverted to base, and I reverted to, okay, what do I already know? What are my standard messages? What's my core content that I can deliver and rearrange in a way that will still deliver what I've been asked to deliver? So that's the first thing. How can you, without max preparation time, how can you revert to known, familiar content? And how can you repurpose content that you've already got, whether it's an existing slide deck, an existing presentation? How can you lean on what you already have to minimize that prep time and to minimize that mental bandwidth that goes into creating new content? The next thing that Lauren mentioned was the slides. Like, she's standing on stage and the slides aren't working in the way that she'd anticipated. When that happens in the moment, there's not a lot you can do. There's not a lot you can do. And when that's happened to me, and trust me, it's happened, I just tend to look at them and go, well, that is not what I was anticipating. That's not what I meant. I've learned, and you just have to move on. You just have to kind of look at it and go, well, that's not what I was intending, and you move on. What I've learned now after years of tech fails is a couple of things. First of all, do your best to check what your presentation is going to look like on the presentation computer and on the presentation data projector, because sometimes if you haven't embedded the fonts, if somebody's using a different version of PowerPoint, all sorts of weird and wonderful things go on. The best way to circumvent that, if you're not presenting from your own computer, provide the slides in a PDF. Don't try to present from Canva or from PowerPoint. Just send the slides in PDF. Make sure you embed your fonts, and that way you know that what you've designed is what's going to show up on screen. If you are using your own computer, make sure you know what the presentation format is, like what size screen, etc. And then do your best to check it in the break. Before you go on stage. I will often ask the event organizers, when can I get access to the room? When can I get access to the AV, just to test everything? And then I'll do a quick flick through of all of my slides up on the big screen, not just plugged in, but I want to see what they look like on the big screen, because sometimes there's lighting issues, not just the image being garbled, etc. Oh, and the final thing, make sure you're presenting, where possible, locally, as in not cloud-based. Because if you're presenting in a room and a lot of people are using the Wi-Fi, that can also hinder your presentation quality. So that's how I circumvent those kind of things going pear-shaped now. The other thing, and I want to tap into what Lauren was saying, was in terms of the slides being garbled through her. Always, 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 always have your speaking notes separate to your slides. Always. I see so many speakers use their slides as their prompt for what they're going to say. And there's a few things that I don't like about that. And one of them is this: when you're using your slides and your slides aren't behaving, it's very hard to stay on message and ignore the fact that the slide doesn't look like you expected it to look. Whereas if you've got your notes separate, then you can almost turn your back on the slides and just go, well, that's not what I was expecting, and then still deliver the content that you're planning to present. So always have separate notes, to your slides. And in fact, I will pop a link in the show notes for this one. My frame your thinking method and how I prepare my speaking notes, completely separate from my slides, completely separate. Now let's move on to the next issue. What do you do when you notice when an audience member or two is sleeping or completely and utterly disengaged? Oh, that's hard to not take personally, but you do need to not take it personally. You don't know what they've been up to. You don't know what they did the night before. You don't know whether there was big conference drinks, and you certainly, particularly if you're the speaker after lunch, you're dealing with the post-carb slump. So here's a couple of things. First of all, engage in a state change. As you notice people dozing off, and this happens to me all the time because I'm often one of the speakers in a bigger conference program, do a state change with the room. So how you can do a state change, if you need to do a big one, get everyone to stand up. You can literally acknowledge and go, okay, before I go on to the next point, just everybody stand up for me. Everyone stand up. And because we've just had lunch, let's just get our bodies moving a little bit. I've often done, have people cross one hand to the opposite knee, etc. Or I'll do a funny and say, pat your head and rub your tummy at the same time. You get people laughing, but most importantly, you get people moving. So if you've got people who are falling asleep, they're not falling asleep anymore. They are not falling asleep. If you don't feel comfortable in getting people up and moving, ask them to do a paired share. Before I move on to the next topic, just turn to the person next to you and tell them, what have you learnt the most? Or what's your biggest challenge in relation to whatever you're talking about? Generate some conversation. Again, just the state change, that shift from being spoken at to interaction, will move your audience and get them engaged again in what you're saying. Now, another tip for this one, and I spoke about this recently in episode 164, how to engage your audience. The start of every presentation, you want to engage your audience. You want to get them responding to you. How I do this is I will often ask a question that has a positive answer from everyone. Who here would like to have greater speaking confidence, for example? And as I'm doing that, I'm putting up my hand. Who here would like to have greater speaking confidence? And as everybody puts up their hand and as everybody nods, I've got engagement in the room. And so what this does is it prevents that audience response that can sometimes happen in a big conference where they kind of walk back in after lunch and they sit down and like, what am I here for? I don't care. I'm a bit tired. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Whereas when you get that engagement from the get-go, you've got them connected with you. They're yours now instead of disconnected and passive observers. That other piece then around getting engagement from the room at the very beginning, it means that you're not letting the energy of the room, in this case, the post-lunch slump, dictate the response to your presentation. You're creating the state, you're creating the energy, and you're generating the engagement in the room. My final piece on this is sometimes this is how it goes. If you are speaker number 11 in a big conference lineup where people are only there for one or two speakers, or they're there for the professional development points or the CPD points, or they had a massive night the night before catching up with all of their mates. It's not about you. It's not about you. And what you can control is how you present. What you can control is the message that you deliver. What you can control is connecting with the people who are responding to you. So, yeah, it's very hard to not take that kind of feedback personally. And at the end of the day, it's not personal. It's just that we're seeing it. I was just thinking, there's plenty of times when people don't listen to a full podcast episode, for example, or there's plenty of times where I've had people walk out over a presentation of mine. That's not about me. That's about their priorities, what's important to them, what they need to get done in a day, whatever's going on. So I think it's really important to not take it personally and understand that in every audience, you will have a handful of raving fans, a handful of interested people, and another handful of people who really don't care. And that's okay. You can't please everyone, as they say. So I hope that helps. And if it's a disaster, learn from it, move on, and kind of file it away as, thanks. How do I not do that again in future? As I said, I talk about those. I've spoken about other techniques to engage your audience in previous episodes. So both of those are linked in the show notes. Recently, Spotify alerted me to the fact that I had clocked over 10,000 downloads. And in fact, I'm now at 15,000 downloads. And so what I would love is for your help to reach the next milestone, hit the next 20, 30, and even 50,000 streams and downloads. So if you would be so kind, could you comment if you're listening on Spotify? Could you leave a review if you're listening or watching on Spotify or on Apple? Or could you share this podcast with other people, whether it's in your social media networks or with your colleagues and friends? If you're listening, just take a screenshot now on your phone and just post it to your social media networks. It would really help me reach more people and help more people, particularly the introverts, the humble leaders, and the quiet achievers, to contribute to the conversations that matter. And it'd help me hit my next podcasting milestone. So thanks. Finally, just a reminder about my upcoming online workshop, The Goldilocks Effect, where I'm going to show you how to say not too little, not too much, but just the right amount to land your message every single time. It's happening on Thursday, the 30th of October, and the link is in the show notes. If you have a question that you would like me to answer on this podcast, just like Lauren did, please, just ask. Easiest way to do that is to head over to Instagram. Link is in the show notes, or at Kat Matson, and just ask away. Or post it as a comment if you're listening on Spotify, and I will answer in an upcoming episode and let you know when I've done that as well. I hope this episode will help you manage any disasters that you have, or better still, prevent any speaking disasters. I'd love to know about your disaster stories, because there's always plenty. But in the meantime, until I get to speak to you again, here's to confidence and here's to impact. Hope you have a fabulous day, and I'll see you again soon.